Hello, New Society members. My name is Kenya Rutland, and I'm very happy to welcome you today. At this point in your orientation, you've learned more about the National Society of Leadership and Success, the steps you need to take to achieve induction, and the local schedule and opportunities to get more involved at your campus. At this point in time, we're going to talk a little bit about a tool that the Society provides to our members. At your next local event, your Leadership Training Day, you will be introduced to the Society's Foundations of Leadership. That is 6 steps that every leader must take to be successful. Today, we're going to lay the groundwork for one of those foundations by looking at the concept of communication. Specifically, the idea that leaders must be effective communicators in order to empower others and inspire them to action. And so it's toward that end that we're going to spend a little time here together sharing a tool that we actually use at the national office to explore how each of us communicates and how we can use that knowledge to better communicate with others. But I'm not just going to talk at you. This is going to be interactive as a process. So we'll be setting up some ideas, some activities, and when I say, okay, now taking action, I want you watching this video to make sure you actually do it in that moment. So let's jump into an exercise to introduce our concept in action. This exercise is known as the 4 corners. This exercise will highlight the fact that there are 4 distinct communication styles. The value here is that following along with our foundations of leadership, in order to empower others and inspire them to action, we need to understand where we are with communication so we can meet them where they are. Here's what we have. First off, we're going to get into 4 corners through a 2-step process. First, we're going to divide into 2 sections. What we're getting into here is really how you and I see the world, or how we see ourselves in environments that we enter. There are 2 responses to this, and I like to describe them both first, and then have you decide which description sounds most like you. Some people see the world at an active pace. When we use the term active, we're referring to fast pace, dynamic, bold, maybe even seeing it as people who come into an environment and feel that they can shape whatever room they're in. So imagine if we're in a quiet room right now and you actually walk in, an active pace person would actually make some noise if they felt that it was too quiet. So they're coming in with the idea that they can make it what they want. On the other side of the spectrum are people who tend to be a little bit more thoughtful. And when we use the term thoughtful, we think of a moderate pace, calm, methodical, maybe even careful. For them, unlike their active peers, if a thoughtful person walks into that same quiet room, they're likely to adjust their own behavior to fit into the environment that already exists in that space. So based on those 2 sides of the spectrum, I'd like for you to think about which one best describes you. I know it's not absolutely black and white, but just choose whichever one you think is the majority of the time in the majority of situations. So if you're active, I'd like for you right now to write down the word red somewhere. On the flip side, if you think that you're more thoughtful in your approach to in an environment, I'd like for you to write down the word blue. Remember how I said before I need you to actually do things? This is that moment. Grab your pen and paper and write down either the word red for active or the word blue for thoughtful. Right now. Now that we've divided into 2 groups based on how we approach an environment, we're going to shift away from what you do when you enter an environment, and now we're going to think about what you focus on when you're working in an environment. First, there's the idea of being questioning. When we say questioning, that means someone is in an environment or group and says something to the effect of, "What's going on here? What are we doing?" For them, it's about logic, objectives, and questioning with the idea that they want the facts before they decide to do something. On the other side of this spectrum are people with the idea of being accepting. For folks that are accepting, they say, "Hey, you know who's here doing whatever we're doing?" So where the questioning group, the focus is on what's happening, the focus with the accepting group is on who is doing it. For this group, it's about empathizing, being agreeable, and who they're doing it with. So big picture, if you're questioning, you might be said to be more task focused. If you're accepting, you might be more people or relationship focused. So again, going back to the two colors. If you find yourself to be questioning in most situations, I'd like for you to write down red. If you find yourself to be most accepting in most situations, go ahead and write down blue. Take a moment and write those words down right now. Now that you've chosen and written down responses to both questions, we'd like to give you the chance to engage in a conversation around this and understand exactly what that means for you. From the answers you just gave, we're going to split you into what we're calling the four corners. So let's talk about exactly what each of those corners means that you've been divided into by your choices. For starters, if you chose red, you're likely to be thinking something along the lines of, what's going on and how can I mold it? If you chose red-blue, you're likely to be thinking, who's here and how can I influence them? If you chose blue-blue, you're likely to be thinking, who's here and how can I help them? And finally, if you chose blue-red, you're likely to be thinking, what's going on and how can I make sure it's right? Ultimately, people in each of these corners have a different focus when walking into a new space. What I'd like you to do is to take a moment and identify why it is that you chose the corner that you did during this exercise. To facilitate and help this to stick a bit more, we're going to do a quick activity. I'm going to describe it first, and then I'll tell you when to get started. First, you need to choose a partner sitting next to you in the room. If anyone ends up without a partner, go ahead and make a group of 3. So you'll be speaking with 1 or 2 other people. Then you're going to have 3 minutes to talk to one another about which colors you chose and why you chose what you did. Whether you're active or thoughtful, and whether you're questioning or accepting. Your 3 minutes begins now. Go ahead and get started. So now that you understand how you approach an environment and you also what you focus on when you're operating in it, we're going to take a look at how our communication really affects our ability to interact with others and specifically the need for us to be aware of the impact it has on others. To get this awareness, we're going to do another activity. Just like before, I'm going to talk you through some instructions and then have you go ahead and actually do it when I say it's time to get started. First off, you're going to work again with the same partner or partners you chose for the first activity. You and your partner will start by identifying roles. First, someone will need to be the communicator and someone will need to be the listener. If you have a group of 3, you'll have 1 communicator and 2 listeners. So right now, before we go any further, identify your partner or partners and who is going to take each role. You have 15 seconds to figure it out. Go ahead and assign those roles right now. Now that everyone has a role, here are the rules of the activity. We're going to play a game similar to the board game Taboo, where the communicator is going to give clues and the listener is going to try to guess the word being described based on these clues. There are some rules that you need to follow. First, speaking just to my communicators, there are going to be a series of words on the screen. Your task is to help the listener guess the words as quickly as possible through clues you can give. You cannot use the same word they're trying to guess in the clue. Listeners, your rule to follow is simply you have to turn away from the screen. All right, so we're going to begin the activity. Listeners, you need to turn away from the screen right now. Go ahead, turn away. Communicators, the words are going to appear in a moment and you want to help them guess as many words as possible. You will have 2 minutes to get this done and that time begins now. Now that we're back from the exercise and your time is up, you're going to take a couple of minutes to answer questions with your partner or partners about what just happened. You're going to take 3 minutes to answer the questions that are going to show on the screen about the experience you had together. Your 3 minutes begins right now. Having completed the activity now and debriefed on it, there are a few key takeaways I want to highlight from this exercise. First, as leaders, we need to understand our own style in order to communicate better with others. The second thing to highlight is that many of us would experience challenges while trying to get through this activity with your partner. Some things to think about, though, are 1, maybe your partner needed more detail. Or 2, maybe they would have gotten the point if there had been some emotive body language put into it. Or 3, someone might have just wanted you to stick to the bullet points without extra fluff. Regardless, those challenges in a simple activity like this have a real impact on our ability as leaders to communicate well with others. And the last piece to highlight today is that while we know our own style, when we realize there are challenges, we have to be able to discover and understand where other people are coming from so we can speak the language they need us to speak in order to best communicate with them. So that's where the crucial connection is going to be. To recap that again, 1, we need to know and understand our own style. 2, we need to recognize the challenges that come up in conversations. And 3, we need to be able to identify and recognize how to flex our natural inclinations to meet the preferred style of others in order to meet them in having an effective conversation. The last piece to talk through today are a few things that typically come up when we begin looking at communication styles. First, what we identified today is that we all have a preferred communication style. Next, there is absolutely no right or wrong to one style or another. They're different, but there is nothing right or wrong with any style. Third, knowing someone else's style will make you more effective at changing your own communication in order to be more effective in working with them and in minimizing conflicts due to communication. And finally, as leaders, we need to communicate in the language of our listeners or team members in order to effectively work with and lead them. So today, we've looked at a very high level at behavior and communication styles with a focus that comes from a tool known as the DISC assessment. We use DISC at our national office and at our regional leadership retreats as a tool that helps us to communicate better with others in order to lead them. Now, let's talk about your next steps. After the orientation, your chapter leaders will be entering your attendance into our online system. Once your attendance is entered, you will each get an email inviting you to take a free online DISC assessment through our members area portal. When you complete that assessment, you will get information that applies directly to your own communication style, a video, and a downloadable document that will help you to understand the ins and outs of your personal style. But we're not done there. It's great to learn more about ourselves, but of course we want to use this tool to help us be better leaders, to empower others and inspire them to act. To that end, we're going to dive back into communication styles and how you can use those to work more effectively with others during Leadership Training Day, the next step coming up as you work towards induction. So be sure you know when your Leadership Training Day is scheduled and put it on your calendar because we'll be giving you practical leadership tools during that event. I'll see you again at Leadership Training Day.